One big question in biology was, what is genetic information? Is it DNA or is it protein? Scientists really didn't know. They knew that genetic information was transferred, but what exactly it was just wasn't known. One study that essentially solved this argument or this question was called the Hershey-Chase Experiment. And the Hershey-Chase experiment utilized two things. So one, it utilized a virus a virus containing DNA and proteins, to transfer the DNA or proteins into a bacteria, which I have drawn on the right. And they also utilized a sort of newer technology called radioactive isotope labeling. And to explain that, let me bring down my two figures. So, figure over here, let's bring down this other figure over here. So they said, okay, so we want to know, is it the DNA that is being, is it the DNA that's genetic information? Or is it the protein? Virus is composed of an outer protein coat, for those who don't know. So is it the protein that is the genetic information? And in order to track the DNA and the protein, they decided to label them. So the DNA is composed of a phosphate backbone. So they labeled the DNA with a 32P, so phosphorus 32, radioactive isotope, and they labeled the protein with 35S, so sulfur 35. It essentially, using this, they could track the movement of the DNA and the protein in this experiment. So now let's move on to the experiment themselves. So for the purpose of my drawings, I'm using these little green ovals to represent the bacteria. So let's start with the DNA. So in this case, let's act like DNA is the genetic material. So the DNA is going to attach to the bacteria, and then in that case, the DNA is going to attach to the bacteria. Okay. Another case, let's see. In this case, we're assuming, the protein is the genetic information. Now, if the protein was the genetic information, inside this bacteria, we would expect 35S, so sulfur 35, remnants of 35S sulfur inside after this genetic information is transferred. Because remember, they don't know it's DNA yet. And on this one, they would expect 32P. And what the scientists found out was, drumroll please, after this transfection process occurred, inside remained sulfur 32P, or remnants of sulfur 32P. Thus, they were able to prove that DNA was genetic information carrier, essentially. And that has huge implications, which I will get into in later videos.